So Alexandra, would you say actually that all in all artificial intelligence is a political topic, or is it not?
Well, I would say that first of all, it's a technological and scientific topic, but increasingly it is becoming a political theme, even though I think high-ranked politicians tend not to view it as such and tend to neglect it as an issue. I think because of the fact that it influences most spheres of our life right now, including healthcare, workplaces, education, and such, it is a political theme as any other big, large theme for a society. And apart from that, obviously, you know, it's a big theme or topic because of the very fact that it shapes politics. Mm-hmm. When we think about microtargeting, for instance, about all the practices that are related to machine learning and to various data analysis that provide you the information about who your voter is, it is also not only on a level of a topic, but it's also a political tool, and as such, it is political too.
What is actually micro-targeting?
Micro-targeting is a nice notion, right? I mean, it's an interesting notion, but most of all, it's a way to do predictive analytics using data that people leave online, mainly in the social media, really, that allow to understand their political declarations and how these declarations are shaped. So even by simple likes and follows, and you know, by the stuff that people write, you can derive keywords, and through that you can have a pretty nice map, you know, of their possible potential and mostly really corresponding to the truth political views. And I think these methodologies that are heavily invested in machine learning and deep learning were used recently by various campaigns, by various political centers to shape the outcome of elections. You know. But obviously micro-targeting is not only about elections, and it's not only about politics. It's just that we know it from politics because that's the field where it became so big and transparent recently.
If you describe micro-targeting as that, it's quite interesting because our perception of modern politics or of modern citizen was always that by gaining different knowledge, he's capable of actually changing his opinion. Yeah? Micro-targeting in that sense means if I kind of discover a certain opinion, I can strengthen it, which is kind of contradictory to what liberal democratic thinking actually was at the beginning of modernity.
Yeah, I think it's very true what you're saying, and it's also very relevant because, well, we do have a situation of a very large polarization, and that polarization is enhanced by these technologies. So it is really the case that it's not all about persuasion, but it's more about finding out who is where, classifying it, clustering, and doing all sorts of things with data that we usually do with different types of machine learning to really understand who is where and also whom to maybe influence, right? The others can be influenced by this, let's say, central node of the network that you just detect. And if you try to somehow, you know, persuade that central node, this central node will just discipline that electorate for you. So I think it's a bit of a mixed scheme in the sense that you still have the aspect of persuasion, but it's not necessarily an aspect that you are placing in the politician's hands. It's an aspect that you kind of are trying to disperse in the network. So there are people who influence other people's opinions. But even when you look around on your Facebook, right, what's on your wall, right? I mean, what's showing up and what's prioritized, you can already see that obviously you are in that bubble, usually. You may be exposed to other points of views. Obviously, you can try and balance that, but if it wasn't for your effort to balance things, probably you would end up being surrounded by things and people that really to a certain extent, reconfirm what you were thinking before, right? So we have all those bubbles, and I think once the bubble is created, you can add even more content to that. And I think it has happened to me several times, especially during the election period that is so hot, that I would be kind of exposed to certain videos, to certain, let's say, posts that would, well, reassure me that my ideas were just fine.
If you disenfranchise yourself entirely from the other opinions, you would disenfranchise yourself from the idea of what democracy basically is. Yeah? To have a public discussions with like conflicting opinions within a poll. And in this regards, we have probably this political challenge ahead of us. The other one is for sure the deployment of artificial intelligence within the labor market.
The job market is going to change. Now people are talking about the fact that profession will become something that is obsolete. People will not have professions. They will have on-demand jobs that they will perform here and there, right, in this whole platform ecosystem. I think this is like a big change, number one, and it's a technology-mediated change because obviously machines do contribute to all those platforms heavily, right? They basically process all the data that is within those platforms that allows the intermediaries to link people together, those that want something with those that have it, right? I mean, and that's how these platforms basically exist. So I think this is number one, but number two is which jobs will stay with us and which jobs we will lose and what sorts of jobs will get generated around technology. Because so far, and I think it's still the case, technology is generating new kinds of professions. When you think about user experience designer or when you think about, I don't know, even a coder, these were not popular jobs. And on the other hand, in the 19th century, in the United States, everyone, 80% of the society was working in agriculture. Now it's 2%. So, I mean, the labor market is obviously changing and is being reshaped by technologies constantly. But on the other hand, we are facing a situation where less and less jobs possibly may be generated. Or these jobs that will be generated will be jobs for knowledge workers, right? For people who are already skilled and can get reskilled somehow to perform jobs that are technology assisted, technology aided, or I don't know, technology enhanced somehow. So there is a big question mark about what to do with that, right? In the future, if we have less jobs for ourselves, if technology is doing more jobs and we are jobless to a certain extent, then where is it going to take us as a society? And this, I think, is a key political issue that should be already now discussed.
Well, losing the job actually within our current framework, legal framework, entails that you get rid of your social rights, partly. The retirement arrangements are linked to the job that you have done before. So this is why actually losing the job is not only losing a main gate to society itself, since the labor market still is one of our main gates, or what actually constitutes our society, but all of this entails something that questions your status as a citizen, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you have in mind any solution how we can tackle this?
Well, I don't myself, but I think there are a few solutions on the table, or at least one that is mostly visible, and it comes really from progressive circles. And obviously, you know, this solution, if we face a situation of less and less jobs for humans, could be the so-called universal basic income, which is by itself, I don't think, a really new idea. This idea has been discussed for a while now. Some people perceived it as a sort of fantasy, techno-utopian fantasy, but now we are, I think, realizing that we don't have much more on the table as far as constructive proposals are concerned, right? So what we have is a situation where machines and technologies will increasingly play a bigger and bigger role on a job market, and they will be performing jobs that we are now doing better than us, right? And thus we will be replaced, right? In many professions, especially those simple ones, a machine that never gets tired, is never sick, and can do very simple tasks just as well as humans will be probably, at least in the capitalist framework, a much better employee. And thus, I really think that this solution of universal basic income is an interesting one. I know it's been debated in a few countries. There are only few pilot projects, and they don't really let us understand what happens when people get that universal basic income. Will they be searching for jobs? Or will they be developing themselves? Will they be studying? What will they be essentially doing when they get some sort of guaranteed income? Well, I guess this is a big question mark, but I think there should be more of such pilot projects done because, well, the time is now. Because if we don't decide on anything, at this point, I think we will have really more difficult, more polarized situation in the future, right? So some countries, some regions will be left with a very scarce job market and very little to offer to their citizens, and that will only cause riots and problems. So I think universal basic income and both taxation of robots or taxation of machines generally is a proposal that is definitely worth considering. And I think a lot of research can be done with that, and we can prepare ourselves pretty diligently to that. And if there are any indicators that this may actually work, I think it should be at least partially implemented, although I know very well that in many circles, particularly corporate circles, this is not a solution that is so much welcomed.
If you say, okay, let's address the political issue behind it, what is actually the political issue? Is it the technology itself? Is it you as a researcher who is doing the work she's doing? Is it the consequences of the implementation of technology? What is the issue that should be addressed?
The issue, societal issues that emerge as consequences of heavily usage of technology. So, I mean, the future of labor is definitely, or future of work, if you will, is definitely a political topic that you need to address. But also what you need to address, I guess, and requires some sort of political consensus is, for instance, I don't know, ethics and artificial intelligence, or governance in artificial intelligence. I am not quite sure if politicians really understand that, for instance, blockchain as a protocol will probably influence democracy as you know it very heavily, right? And I also think that many other technologies can, to a certain degree, also replace political work. And in that respect, that should be also of interest for politicians to discuss it. But nonetheless, leaving that aside, I think so societal and economical consequences of platform capitalism, you know, of the so-called sharing economy, of the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning within that sharing economy as it develops. These are all issues that require consideration. We need also new laws and regulations because we will soon have lots of new autonomous agents, not only on the roads. We don't mean only cars. We mean also development of the Internet of Things. We will have lots of sensors that will collect various data that will communicate with us and with other objects out there that also have sensors. And we will have a society where data constantly flows to different places, right? How to store safely that data, how to manage that data safely. These are all matters that require regulation and some sort of political consensus. How far do we want to go with the AI, for instance, as a project? Do we want to advance deep and machine learning without knowing what's really in it is yet another issue. Do we want to create machines that make political or ethical choices, for instance, such as drones, autonomous cars? These are all questions that require big political debates, and I'm just assuming that we're really late with that.
The point is, like you mentioned, it's not about the political decisions, but more about the political debates itself. Which leads us to the question that actually, apparently we are dealing with a lot of different uncertainties that kind of merges into a big anxiety. I would say one of the biggest deficiencies of our current times is that we don't have an idea what we actually demand from technology. Or in another word, there is this uncertainty in regards to our labor market. There's this uncertainty what is actually a human being if a robot can do what we do. There's this uncertainty that we live in a world that is producing knowledge and data, and we are not capable anymore to kind of process this knowledge as human beings, but we need to have like entities beside us that are doing this work for us. So in that sense, and then there's the uncertainty that we just spoke about your daughter, she's 5 years old. Do you have an idea how the world is going to look like when your daughter is 30?
I don't think it will be a world of singularity, really, as some authors describe it. I think it will be a world, though, that is heavily enhanced by technology. So I think for my daughter, autonomous cars that drive around in the center of the city, doing carpooling or whatever, this will be like a very obvious choice. I think she will be exposed to a world of technologies very early in her life. She already is to a certain extent, but in the future, I think the way she will learn and acquire knowledge will be very, very different from the ones that we had before. So it's hard for me really to imagine anything else, but more of the same and strongly, intensively present, you know, because when you think about the trends that you observe right now, these are definitely trends to add data everywhere you can. So I'm quite sure that her life will be life in the stream and constant flow of data. Maybe deep personalization, right, of various services. This will be something that she will also face, right, that she will be a very known to the systems that will service her or, like, you know, provide products for her and so on. So I quite assume that personalization is a trend that we can rely that is going to be growing. And when she's an adult, it might be really something pretty spectacular, but also scary. But coming back to your question, I just think that the world of technologies right now is very different from what people have predicted in the past, you know. And I was reading today in the morning that Isaac Newton wouldn't have understood what the iPhone is about, even if we were trying to use the vocabulary that they were using in physics at that time to describe him what he just sees right now. That this to him would be just magic. Still, despite everything, despite his whole genius and rationality, he would still classify this thing as not possible to exist, right? Such bright lights, everything, you know, all that, probably he would have classified it as something weird. So sometimes when I think about the world of the future, I think to myself that, you know, okay, I will not try to extrapolate trends because maybe this will be just magic to me.